Start over again. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here tonight. We're glad to see you and look forward to our time studying together. In this Wednesday night class, we're doing a review of really familiar section of scriptures, the Beatitudes, the introductory statements in the famous Sermon on the Mount that Jesus preached. These are in Matthew chapter 5. That's the beginning of the sermon. And each week we've been just starting out by reading quickly through this initial paragraph of the Sermon on the Mount. Let's do it again. Matthew 5, verse 1. Seeing the multitudes, he went up to a mountain, and when he was set, his disciples came unto him, and he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Stop there for a minute. I hope you remember those three. We've already studied those first three. I hope those ring true to you. Keep reading there. Verse 6. Verse 6 is what we'll study tonight. Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. Okay, so there are the Beatitudes, and again, remember we've already mentioned those first three, and our study tonight is about the fourth one. Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness. Now, remember the word blessed here, that is the word from which we get the Beatitudes. The Beatitudes, beatus, Latin for blessed. I saw where the Amplified Bible is not a true translation. It's almost more of a commentary. But for this expression in the Amplified Bible, it says, blessed and fortunate and happy and spiritually prosperous are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Well, that's obviously, I think, expanding greatly on that word, but all of that is sort of synonymous with this idea of blessedness. Blessed and fortunate and happy and spiritually prosperous. Well, that sounds great. I like that. I want that, don't you? And so these Beatitudes are telling us the things that we need to do, the way we need to be, the way we need to think and act in order to be blessed by God. So the expression this week, the blessedness comes for those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. And so we want to expand upon that and see how well we can grasp the meaning. When was the last time you were hungry? Well, someone says, well, I was working pretty hard today, and I got into the lunch hour before I could stop and get a bite to eat. I was pretty hungry by the time I got around to get a little bit of lunch today. That's not this word. When was the last time you were thirsty? Well, just before, in fact, this was true of me, just before we left the house to come over here, I said, I got to get a drink. I'm thirsty, need a little drink. And I just took a sip. I didn't take much, but just a little drink, thirsty. That's not this word. To just have a mild craving for something to eat or, just a little twinge of thirst, that's not the meaning here. These words are much stronger. And so our first point is to stress that the words hunger and thirst here are describing extreme desire for something to eat, something to drink. The people back in Jesus' day would have been very familiar with real hunger, more so than we've ever known. Probably, I don't want to overgeneralize, but typically they were way more familiar with true hunger than we would be in our prosperous age. Back then, a working man earned a penny a day. The word in our New Testaments is actually a denarius. Often in the King James Version it's translated a penny. But that's a denarius or a penny is what a working man earned for a day. And that's typically what it would take to feed him and his household the next day. And so these people were literally a day away from being without food. They were in that kind, they were basically one step ahead of real hunger. And so the idea of hunger was more meaningful maybe to them than us. They probably knew hunger in a sense that we have not. It was not. This was not the idea. I'm just going to grab a snack. I just want a light snack, or I just want a sip of water. This was real craving. In the Psalms, I think the idea that we're trying to get across is expressed pretty well in Psalm 63, verse 1. O God, thou art my God, early will I seek thee. My soul thirsteth for thee, my flesh longeth for thee in a dry and thirsty land where no water is. I think that puts it pretty well. And again, it wasn't, I want a little bit, I just want a bite, I just want a sip. That wasn't this. This wasn't the idea. I just want a little bite of bread. I want the whole loaf of bread. I am starving to death. I am about to die of dehydration. So when we think of if you can hang on to this every time you read through this section in the future, remember, hunger. That's the word. There is a word that describes somebody who's dying of lack of food. The thirst is the word that you would use to describe somebody who is dying of dehydration. These are extreme words, and Jesus used them intentionally. So, what are we striving for? For righteousness. And so, I need to be so hungry. I need to hunger for righteousness like a starving man. I need to desire righteousness like a person who is dying for lack of water. That's the strength of the expression here. And I don't think our English words necessarily convey the intensity of that. But my understanding is that those words have that kind of extreme measure. Thoughts or comments, anybody? Wayne?
Yeah, just the word blessed has that same kind of connotation as well. It doesn't translate very well into English. Makarios. The Greeks believed that there was an island somewhere in the Mediterranean called Makarios where everything was blessed. Everything was just like Shangri-La. Just a perfect environment. And so one is extremely blessed. I mean, not just happy, not just blessed, but the ultimate in blessing, the ultimate
overflowing.
Yeah, overflowing.
Yeah.
So it's the same kind of concept of hunger and thirst.
Yeah, Jesus was using words here that, like you said, probably doesn't come across real accurately in our English, because it doesn't convey the idea of the extreme or the intensity that he was trying to convey with this statement. Good point. So I'm supposed to hunger and I'm supposed to thirst. And what I'm supposed to hunger and thirst for is righteousness. I don't know about you, but I think sometimes this word righteousness sort of has a mystical or mysterious sense to it. It's a church word. It's a religious word, and people throw out this idea of righteousness, and it may involve all kinds of weird things. It's really not that. Righteousness is not that. The righteousness simply means to be right. And the righteousness that we seek is a right standing before God. There's no mystery to that word. Now, I don't know if you've sensed that like I do, but for some reason I have the idea that people want to make righteousness into some kind of weird mystical thing, and it's just not. It's just very simply, righteousness is to be right. And when used in this kind of context, it is to be right with God. Thayer says that here's a simple definition. Thayer says it is the state of one. It's the state of one who is such as he ought to be. That's pretty well stated. It is the state of one who is such as he ought to be, the condition acceptable to God. That's not hard, right? That's not a difficult word. Tom?
Think about when Jesus talking to his disciples and others, telling them that unless your righteousness exceed that of the Pharisees. People view Pharisees as righteous, but Jesus is saying there were problems with them because they didn't carry on that righteousness. They did the literal portion of the law, on tithing and different things like that, but they sort of ignored the other parts that God considered righteousness as well. And Jesus made the point that, you think these people are righteous, but your righteousness has to exceed theirs. Well,
Sure.
how can it exceed? And so you have to sort of comprehend, what does God really want you to do?
I think you're right. So we don't get to set the rules for that along the lines of what Tom was saying. I think we studied here in Romans not so long ago, but in Romans chapter 10, Paul describes the unbelieving Jews of his day. And so he says, "Brethren, my heart's desire and prayer to God for Israel is that they might be saved. For I bear them record that they have a zeal of God, but not according to knowledge. For they, being ignorant of God's righteousness, going about to establish their own righteousness, have not submitted themselves unto the righteousness of God." Notice, they're ignorant of God's righteousness. So there is something here identified as God's righteousness. God gets to set the rules. How can you be right with God? God gets to say that. God gets to determine the conditions whereby you can be right with Him. But notice they were going about to establish their own righteousness. And so notice, there's two words, the same word here, but one of the bases of righteousness comes from God, the other is from man. And notice, when Paul says he wants them to be saved, it clearly indicates that they were not saved at that point. So they hadn't submitted to God's righteousness. Notice, they had not submitted themselves to the righteousness of God. So to be righteousness is just to be right. To be right with God. If you're going to be right with God, God's going to tell you how to do that. You're not going to get to set up your own rules for righteousness. God is going to be the one who sets that standard. And again, it's not hard. It's not hard to understand, but you got to acknowledge where is the source and what is the basis of this righteousness. In Romans chapter 1, Paul says it comes by what has been revealed. Notice, again, familiar passage to us, Romans 1:16. "I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believeth, to the Jew first, also to the Greek. For therein," so notice, he's talking about the gospel of Christ, "therein is the righteousness of God revealed from faith to faith, as is it written, the just shall live by faith." Okay, I want to be right with God. The righteousness of God is revealed in the gospel of Christ. So again, that takes it out of man's hands. It's not up to man to make that determination. God sets those rules. In the religious world of our day, it's pretty stunning when you think about people. I mean, various religious organizations, they actually get together and set rules. They get together and vote and determine what they think is right, and what is good and what is not good, and what's right and what's not right. They don't have the basis for that. They don't have any justification to do that. God says what is right, and notice, the gospel of Christ is where we find the righteousness of God. So if I'm hungering and thirsting after righteousness, then this is where I'm going to go to look for that, right? This is where I have to find out. Now, that necessarily involves action on my part. In 1 John 3, verse 7, "Little children, let no man deceive you. He that doeth righteousness is righteous, and even as he is righteous." So, again, the principles of righteousness are set forth in the gospel. That's where we find out about it. But you don't have it yet. You may know about it. You may be informed about it. But you don't have it until you do something. "He that doeth righteousness is righteous." In other words, you do what has been revealed in the Word of God. The righteousness of God revealed in the gospel of Christ. You do that, and that's how you achieve a righteous standing with God. Pretty straightforward, isn't it? Again, I don't think we have a lot of trouble understanding. Those words are easy enough to understand. Notice James 2. Was not Abraham our father justified by works when he had offered Isaac his son upon the altar? Seest thou how faith wrought with his works, and by works was faith made perfect? And the scripture was fulfilled, which saith, Abraham believed God, it was imputed to him for righteousness, and he was called the friend of God. Okay, there's our word again, righteousness. But notice in the context here, the emphasis on works. Abraham was justified by works. Notice, faith wrought with works. By works was faith made perfect. So, again, strong connection in multiple places between what you do and where it places you. It places you in a righteous standing with God. When you learn what's revealed in His Word and you act upon it to do what the Word instructs you to do. I don't know why that's a difficult concept. I don't, and I really don't understand why any person with any religious inclination would want to argue that. It seems so very straightforward, doesn't it? As it's set forth here in the Word. One more place. Notice Acts 10:35. Peter was at the household of Cornelius, and he said to them, in every nation he that feareth God and worketh righteousness is accepted with him. I think that's a powerful statement because it's right there together. You work righteousness. You do what's right as revealed in the Word of God. You work that. You take action, and then you can be, notice, accepted with Him. That's what we want, right? We want to be accepted with Him, but we have to work righteousness. Thoughts or comments here? Anybody? Eric?
I'm glad you included that verse there because it's talking about, I've always viewed this not only as personal righteousness, but everything around righteous as well. You know, my brothers and sisters, my church family, my community, nations, like it says there, it's not just personal righteousness, it's wanting everything right around.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is, if I could expand upon your idea there, Eric, this is not just a little cubby hole I've got over here. This is God's righteousness, and I do that a couple hours a week. You know, I engage in pursuits of righteousness, and then the rest of the week I just go about doing whatever. Now this is all consuming. I think you're right. Any other thoughts here? All right. Now, so remember when you read this passage, we're talking about extreme desire, hunger, and thirst. I was thinking of an illustration of that, and I mention it pretty often. You all know that I like to watch the old Western movies. And it seems that a fairly common theme in a lot of the old Western movies is they're going across the desert. For some reason, they got to go across the desert. I don't know why they can't go around the desert, but they always want to go across the desert. And invariably, they run out of water. You know, they're going along, and before they realize it, the water, they had a water keg strapped on the back of a mule, and it's been leaking all the way, and they didn't know it. And now they're halfway across the desert, and their water supply is dried up. You know, and then you know how it plays out, and they're just barely hanging on, trying to get to the next water hole. And they get to the water hole, and maybe the water hole dried up. And I mean, that theme is pretty common in the old Westerns. But that's the picture here. That's the picture that Jesus wants us to see, as somebody who is so desperate for something to drink. You're going to die. You're not going to make it if you don't get something to drink. That's how much we should desire. That extreme desire to be in a right standing before God. Do you feel that way? Do you really feel that way? Is that what pushes you forward? So Jesus is describing an intense craving to be right with God. And if we really feel that way, if we really have that sort of intense craving, then this statement makes sense. Matthew 6:33 seek ye first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. If that's the way you really feel, like a man about to die because he has no water, and you would, so if you were out there in the desert with John Wayne trying to get across the desert, there wouldn't be anything else on your mind, right? You wouldn't, nothing, your one singular focus would be, I got to get to water. Nothing else mattered. Now nothing else mattered. And so when they were going across the desert, you see them, they start shedding stuff. The horse collapses because the horse doesn't have any water. At first, when the horse collapsed, they take the saddle and they throw it over their back, and they got their gear and they're trying to carry it. Oh, now it doesn't. Now the saddle doesn't even. They throw the saddle away. They've already taken the last drip of water out of their canteen. They throw the canteen away. They're shedding everything. They don't. Now nothing matters, because if they don't get to water, it's over. They have a singular focus, right? I think you can picture that. And that's the idea we want here. We want to have that singular focus on the righteousness of God. So, if I have that, is it a challenge to me to decide whether or not I'm going to go to worship services? To be at services every time the doors are open, so to speak? We used to use that expression a lot, every time the doors are open. If I'm really hungering and thirsting for righteousness, is it a challenge to decide whether I'm going to go to Bible study on Wednesday night? It's really not, is it? It shouldn't be. If I'm hungering and thirsting for righteousness, it should not be a hard thing to say, well, I don't know if I'm going to go to church tonight or not. That decision should be already made, right? I'm hungering and thirsting for righteousness. If I have this deep longing to be right with God, then I'm not going to make the argument, and I've told you this before, but I just absolutely hate this question. Where does the Bible say I have to go to church on Sunday night? Where does the Bible say I have to go to Bible study on Wednesday night? Where does the Bible say I have to be at every night of the gospel meeting? It doesn't. The Bible doesn't say that, right? In so many words. What the Bible does say, though, is I need to hunger and thirst for righteousness. And if that's true, then I will never ask that question. Where does it say I have to? It doesn't say you have to. It says you have to hunger and thirst for righteousness, though, and that answers the question. But it's applicable to just really all aspects of our lives as we live for the Lord. Where does the Bible say I need to pray throughout the day? Pray frequently. Well, it does say pray without ceasing, 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 17, but how much? Really? How often? If I'm hungering and thirsting after righteousness, then I'll be a person of prayer. I'll be the kind of person that tries to teach others around me, to share the gospel with the lost. If I'm hungering and thirsting for righteousness, I'll want to live a life of a high moral standards. I will not be the person who wants to see how close to the line I can get. When it comes to questions of morality, I want to push the envelope. I want to see how close I can get to being like the world without crossing the line and committing sin. No. If I'm hungering and thirsting for righteousness, I'm not going to see how close to the edge I can get. I'm going to stay far away from that. I'm wanting to be right with God. So I really think that this principle is it's a valuable concept to live by. This intensity. And I think obviously that's what I'm stressing to you tonight in this lesson. Thoughts or comments here, anybody? It's not hard, is it? This is not the kind of a study that brings up lots of questions. I wonder about this, I wonder about this. This is pretty straightforward stuff. I think you'll agree with me. All right, so as we've tried to do in each of these studies, we ask, how do I develop that then? If this is clearly it's not, you can't even misunderstand this. You couldn't misunderstand this if somebody was trying to make you misunderstand. But if we've got this, then how do I develop this? Well, first of all, it goes to a recognition of the kind of thing that we've been describing here, of tremendous need, starving to death, dying of thirst. You've got to see yourself that way. I'm afraid, and I'm including myself in all of these things, I'm afraid that we don't see ourselves that way very accurately. I'm afraid we don't see our desperate need. That we're not like that guy in the desert. We're not starving, and we're not dying of thirst. We don't feel that way. We feel kind of smug, kind of self-sufficient. I'm okay. I'm really doing fine. I'm doing fine. We're not, and the only way that we can be right with God is if we recognize the tremendous need that we have. Remember how Jesus said it in Mark 8, verses 36 and 37, "For what shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul?" That we often refer to these rhetorical questions asked, and the answers are so obvious they don't even have to be stated. You wouldn't gain anything. You would have made a bad trade if you gained the whole world. Nobody ever has, but even if you could, some are very wealthy, but they've never achieved all the world's wealth. But if you did, but you had to give your soul in order to get it, bad exchange, terrible trade. There's nothing that compares in value to the soul, and we know that Jesus taught that there in that expression, and that's the way we've got to feel about this, and that's the drive that we have got to have. Again, and I know, here I am talking to the Wednesday night crowd. You guys have made the commitment to be here on Wednesday night, for those who don't make that kind of priority, we feel like maybe part of the problem is they're not seeing their real condition of starving and dying of thirst. Secondly, realize the only source is the Lord. He's the only source of help. So you're out on the desert, and on those old westerns, the guys, they're debating about, if we go this way, it's about 20 miles. There's a water hole. It used to be real reliable, about 20 miles that direction. And they go, oh yeah, but we could go this way. And the Indians always had a place where they got wet water that way. And you have to just, you got to make a choice. You got to decide which way you're going to go to relieve this desperate situation you're in. Not so here. There aren't options. There aren't different ways, different routes to pursue. The Lord is the only source of help. Revelation 22:17, the Spirit and the bride say, "Come." Let him that heareth say, "Come." Let him that is athirst come, and whosoever will, let him take of the water of life freely. Notice, you got to come. You got to come. You've got to come. Him that is athirst, let him come and let him take of the water of life. Take of the water of life freely. Again, there's the only source. The only relief for this spiritual thirst and craving is to come to the Lord. That's the only. Where else are you going to go? If that's your understanding, and if that's your need, and if that's your craving, where else could you go? And very simply, obviously, there isn't any place else to go. Any thoughts here, anybody? All right. So, we got extreme desire for a right standing before God. Intense craving is the emphasis. See your need. See the Lord as your only source of help. And then, what's the outcome of that? If you go about it in that way, the result is they shall be filled. Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. So here's a promise and a promised result. if you do this, if you pursue this righteousness intensely, then you can achieve righteousness with God. I think this is something that I think it sort of evades some people. Some people have I can't be right with God no matter what. It's unattainable. I cannot get there. I cannot be right with God. Jesus said you can be right with God. You can be filled. If you hunger and thirst for righteousness, that craving can be satisfied. You can achieve it. It can be possible. This is really great news, and we ought to be thankful that that ability exists for us. No, notice, you can get there. Some religious groups say you can't. For instance, as we often point out, the Calvinist says that you can't achieve a right standing with God unless you're one of the predestined, foreordained, elected ones. And you know the story. They say certain ones are chosen before the world began. Certain ones are chosen, they will be saved. Others who were not chosen couldn't be saved if they wanted to be. Now, there are so many ways to argue against that false doctrine. But here's a place to argue against that, right? This says if I want it, if I desire it, I can achieve it. I can be filled. If I crave to be right with God, I can get to that. And notice in John chapter 6, verse 35, Jesus said to them, I am the bread of life. He that cometh to me shall never hunger, and he that believeth on me shall never thirst. And picking these verses out, I've picked them intentionally because it plays on that theme of hungering and thirsting. But if you come to Jesus, you shall never hunger, you shall never thirst. I think I hope you see the sort of the theme there running through all those verses. It's achievable. You can get there. You can have it. So in the religious world, there are people who teach false doctrine about that, right? But I wonder, maybe for us, in a more practical way, I wonder if sometimes we wonder, I don't think I'm good enough. I don't think I can ever get there. I don't think I can ever be right with God. I know through the years I've talked to people who felt that way. They just felt sort of doomed and hopeless. I just can't achieve it. I think the way some people feel. And that's just wrong. That's denying the promise that Jesus made here. If you'll come to him, then he'll satisfy that craving for hunger and thirst. Tom?
Just thinking about the lady at the well. They needed water. And the source of that water was Jacob's well. They go out to daily to get it. And Jesus was there, asked her to draw the water. And he started talking to her about the water of life. You drink up and you live. Here, she was having to go out and get water all the time. He was talking that once you get this water, you won't thirst anymore. And that's sort of that concept of, striving for that hunger and thirst after righteousness. You strive for that once, you attain that, you have that access to that water of life that you never thirst for again.
Good point. John 4, where Tom's talking about, Jesus said to the woman, if thou knew, this is John 4, verse 10, if thou knewest the gift of God and who it is that saith to thee, give me to drink, thou wouldst ask of him, and he would have given thee living water. The woman said unto him, Sir, thou hast nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. From whence then hast thou that living water? Art thou greater than our father Jacob, which gave us the well and drank thereof himself, and his children his cattle? Jesus answered and said unto her, Whosoever drinketh of this water shall thirst again, but whosoever drinketh of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst, but the water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water springing up into everlasting life. So, Jesus, again, made that play on physical thirst and spiritual thirst in his famous discussion in John 4 with the Samaritan woman at the well. Thoughts or comments? Anybody? Karen?
When you were mentioning that part about see the Lord as the only source of help, I couldn't help but think of a verse later on in that same chapter there, John 6, when the people started falling away or leaving, following him, and then Jesus asked the 12, "Are you going to leave too?" And Simon said, "Lord, to whom should we go? You have the words of eternal life. You believe, you know, that you are the Holy One of God."
If I can get this, seeing the Lord as the only source. Peter asked, "Where else would we go?" And that fits in with that real well. I think you're right, Clayton.
Thinking about the prodigal son when he's sitting there looking at the pig's food and wishes he could eat it. So he was physically hungry, but he was also probably realized how far short he had fallen of his father's expectations.
Yeah.
And so I was just thinking about, Christians today, there's definitely some that have hit that low, but there's some that have not. Maybe they kind of grew up in the church and whatever. So I was just wondering if they would ever realize this type of hunger. It's just something they can't grasp or maybe even fully appreciate because of having hit that low.
I think I really think that's the problem. I think that's the problem. Because if people feel that need, and as you say, they feel that low, and like the prodigal son who wished he could eat the hog's food, if they felt that way, then we wouldn't be arguing about faithful attendance, moral living. We wouldn't have to keep coming across those themes to people who felt that low and that much in need. I think you're exactly right. Other comments here? Tom?
There, John makes the same concept there as John 6, I think it is, about being the manna from heaven, bread of life, and there in verse 33, for the bread of God that has come down out of heaven and gives life to the world. And they said to him, "Well, give us this bread." And Jesus said, "I am the bread of life. He who comes to me will not hunger, and he who believes in me will never thirst." So,
The same expressions again. Yeah, that's another place where he uses the same terminology. Good point. Good tie-in. Anybody else?
I was sitting here thinking, when you were talking about seeing the Lord as the only source of help, how we're going to have with so many different sources of help. I can go to a therapist, I can find videos on how to fix this in my life or fix that in my life. And it seems like this is a promise from God that if my first priority is to be right with Him, and I go to Him for help first, and He's going to see me through it.
Yeah. And there may be some resources that help me, but you got to be careful because some of them are going to take you a different direction. But there may be some resources that will help me focus on the righteousness of God. But as you say, in our world, a lot of people are distracted by things that are not the true source of this righteousness of God. Anybody else? Wade.
Psalms 2 and verse 12 says, "Kiss the Son, lest he be angry and you perish in the way, for his wrath is quickly kindled. Blessed are all who take refuge in him." So the point that I was trying to make there is he said, "Lest he be hungry and you perish in the way." There is a way to the Son, which I think he's referencing as Jesus in this psalm right here. So I think that's kind of where you're going with this. There is a path to Jesus.
But you could perish if you're not working at it. Okay, good. I think it's interesting because you all are suggesting several other verses that actually use the same kind of concept that Jesus used here in this famous Beatitude. All right. Well, we appreciate the good comments. We've got just a few minutes, so we'll end it there and look forward to continuing our discussion of the Beatitudes next week. But maybe a good exercise it would be to read through that section a couple times each week, and especially remind yourself of the ones. So we've now covered half of them. There's 8 Beatitudes, and we've talked about 4 of them. Remind yourselves of the meaning of the words there and what we do to get it. All right? Appreciate you, everybody.